I was raised in a Christian family, so I don't have the elaborate, dramatic story that I can share. I distinctly remember the moment when I came to faith in Christ. I was about 9 years old, but it was the result of a long process because, as I said, I'd been raised in a home where my parents were believers, my one sister was a believer. So that was really about when I was 8 or 9 years old. I don't have the kind of testimony that makes for good Hollywood narratives because I never did drugs, never got drunk. I knew from an early age that I was called into Christian ministry. I remember very distinctly when I was 10 years old, a call that I came from the Lord into full-time work, and I never doubted from that moment on that that's what I would be doing. Went to the University of Oklahoma. Knew while I was in school there that I was eventually going to go to seminary, so I ended up at Dallas Theological Seminary largely to study under S. Lewis Johnson, who really was my spiritual and theological mentor. He was really my father in the faith. Had the great privilege while I was in seminary of being able to serve as interim pastor of a small Presbyterian church. Even though I was a Baptist, they actually warmly received me for those 3 years. And spent 12 years in Dallas, 8 of which were at Believers Chapel, serving as an associate there with Dr. Johnson. Got my PhD during that period of time, wrote on Jonathan Edwards for my dissertation. Had a couple of major theological shifts during this period of time. Although I was raised in a Christian home, it was an Arminian home. And so I didn't know anything really about the sovereignty of God's grace until about my second year at the University of Oklahoma, and came to understand the doctrines of grace through the teaching of a man by the name of Russ McKnight, who was just a layman in a church where I attended, who taught faithfully through Romans, very much like Lloyd Jones. It took him about 7 or 8 years to get through the book in our Bible study. And then had another major theological shift when Desiring God was released. I think it was about 85 or 86, somewhere along in there, and embraced Christian hedonism wholeheartedly. Pastored again in a number of churches in Ardmore, Oklahoma, and then in Kansas City. Went to Wheaton College in 2000, taught theology there at Wheaton for 4 years. Then went back to Kansas City, and for the next 4 years was primarily writing, traveling with Enjoying God Ministries. And then just, 5 months ago, in September of 2008, became senior pastor at Bridgeway Church in Oklahoma City. So feel like I've returned to my first love, pastoral ministry, and I'm enjoying it immensely. So if anybody who's hearing this lives in the Oklahoma City area, we would love to have you come visit and see what God is doing at Bridgeway Church.